So, Mr. Riley,
Thank you.
currently, aren't cash flow notes already fairly high risk since they're basically issued to cover overhead? That's pretty high risk. If you can't cover your overhead and you have to take out notes, that I would consider be a high risk note.
Well, let me just say this. I think that working cash notes, tax anticipation warrants, these types of measures whereby the person investing in the bonds knows this money is going to be paid back. I mean, this is fairly common. Local municipalities do it. In this case, the RTA, which is a very large entity, is doing it, and they've been doing it. So I'm not sure that I would characterize those as being high risk.
Okay, well, currently CTA's bond rating is A1. Now, that's not the toppest investment grade. And literally, so you would not be, the treasurer would be investing in bonds that are not the top investment grade in this matter if they were to invest in CTA stuff. And certainly, even after you've invested in them, we know quite how quickly bond ratings can get downgraded based on certain financial situations. So is there any level of assurance that you can give us that they would have to get out of these risky bonds immediately?
Well, again, the treasurer does not have to invest in these, at all. And we would be granting the RTA the ability to, as I say, have $400 million of working cash notes, a line of credit, or a combination of the two. It is, if the state treasury decides to invest, this is the language that has to be there. And frankly speaking, I think a lot of bond rating agencies would like this language, whether they thought that the entity was going to default or not. I mean, it's just protection kind of language.
Of course they would like this language. Of course they would. That's the whole point of it. It gives them a super lien over all other creditors in that case, in the case of defaults. But your language, even though you're saying the Treasury would not have to invest in the CTA bonds, the truth is your entire bill is written upon their investment in CTA and RTA bonds. So
no, you're
writing a bill for something that you have just given us testimony saying that they wouldn't have to do it. Well, you're writing a bill to have them do it and give them super protection.
The bill itself, and I think that we shouldn't be, and you're not. You've been down here a long time. You're extremely seasoned. Plus you're a financial professional. The bill, 99% of the bill itself, allows the RTA to go out, the same bill that I had last year, and invest up to $400 million of working cash notes and or a line of credit. I mean, that's the bill itself, not the amendment.
Here's what's interesting is that bill we had no problem voting for. In fact, Republicans voted for your underlying bill. It was not until you brought back to committee after it had been completely brought to the floor. It was going to sail out of the GA, I think. And you brought it back with Amendment 2 language, which is why we are so opposed at this point. And in fact, I've been told by the RTA lobbyists that they are now neutral on the bill that they desperately need. So they moved from supporting the bill to neutral with the Amendment 2 language. So that's how objectionable that amendment is to many of us who see this as a way of giving bondholders a super lien. Now, let's look at page 9, and if you could look at the analysis with me, I'd appreciate it.
Well, I don't know if your analysis is the same as mine.
I'm sorry, not my analysis, but actually the bill as it stands right now. It says, in the case of a default on an interim financing note issued by the Chicago Transit Authority.
What line are you on, Representative
I'm
Ives?
on line 19, page 9
All right.
of Amendment 2. In the case of a default on the interim financing note issued by the Chicago Transit Authority with which state money in the Treasury was invested, the Treasurer may, after giving notice to the authority, certify to the Comptroller the amounts of the defaulted interim financing note in accordance with the applicable rules of the Comptroller, and the Comptroller must deduct and remit to the Treasury the certified amounts of the portion of those amounts from the following proportions of payments to the state funds. And then it says first year it's a third, second year, it's 2/3. My point is that simply by having an investment in any of those financing notes by the CTA, would require or would allow or require the comptroller to actually mandate that the treasurer intercept the money and send it to the bondholders. It doesn't limit
Send it back to the treasurer.
No, it does not. But the funny thing here is that only if the treasurer only has to be invested in. Let's say that the treasurer held 10% of the bonds and 90% of it was held outside of the market with other bondholders. It simply by the treasurer investing in that fund means that all those bondholders can receive the intercept from the treasurer. It does not in any way limit it to only what the treasurer itself has invested in. It says simply because they have invested, period. There's no limiting factor in here whatsoever. There's none. Your language does not limit it. Just because they've invested means that all bondholders could be covered by this intercept.
Well, I can tell you that that would be a pretty
That's exactly what could
remarkable.
happen.
Well,
that's exactly what could happen. Your bill does not limit it.
That's certainly not the intent.
I understand that's not the intent. Unfortunately, if we pass this into law, the courts will interpret it as it's written.
We don't know what the courts would interpret it as.
I'm telling you right now, I think that this language opens it up to every single bondholder, not just the treasurer bonds, to be protected. Additionally, so that's one issue with the bill. The other issue is the fact that Mr. Lucci brought up from the Illinois Policy Institute, and that issue is the fact that these state funds that are intercepted to go to the CTA are actually meant to go to real services that the CTA and its customers base depends on. So whether that's infrastructure projects, fair support, pension obligations, you name it, everything that they need to fund, the money from the state is intended to go to that. It's not intended to pay off bondholders that perhaps made a risky investment at some point and that they have defaulted on. So that intercept money should first go to the CTA and let them decide. If they are truly in default and they need to go through some sort of other procedure, whether it's some sort of super agreement with its creditors to get out of this mess, then so be it. But the bondholders should not be protected above taxpayers, above customers, and above other holders of their debt.
Well, again,
and that includes pensioners, by the way. So your bill doesn't protect for that.
Yeah,
either.
I don't see it that way, and I believe in the investment policy of the RTA. I mean, because that's what the underlying bill is trying to do, that they will be safe, that they will be prudent, that they will invest, they will take their working cash notes and deal with their service boards equitably, and that they will protect the people who are the riders and the users of their services.
I strongly suggest then, if that's what your biggest concern is that the RTA has the ability and the flexibility to add a line of credit and working cash bonds, that you withdraw Amendment 2, that we do not pass it, and that you allow the underlying bill to go forward onto the House floor. And I promise that I'll vote for it on the House floor. But with Amendment 2, I promise that I will oppose it voraciously.
Thank you.
Listen, our staff looked into where this language came from, and when we checked with the Treasurer and the Comptroller's office, neither one of them said that the language came from them. Neither one of them. In fact, we were told it came from the Speaker's office directly. Can I make one more comment? Because yesterday on the House floor, they passed HB 3005. And we reached out to some experts in this field. One of them was Kim Fowler, who's the general counsel with the GOMB. And this was her response to 3005, which this underlying language is the same. I'm thinking that HB 3005 is designed to allow the state treasurer to buy bonds sold by the City of Chicago, Cook, CTA, and RTA and still claim they are a good investment. My guess is that right now the treasurer really can't buy those bonds. It'd be a bad investment for the state and arguably a mini bailout for locals. But this legislation would allow him to help out those locals and claim it's a good deal for the state. The state could be a big bond buyer, especially for short-term bonds, which are difficult for Chicago to sell given their current lousy financial condition. That's what other people are saying about this. This language is horrific for taxpayers of the state of Illinois. It's terrible for people who depend on the CTA because their services will be cut in the case of a default, and bondholders and bankers will be bailed out instead.